Here is Christoph from denationalize.me, today with a new video about Romania. There have been some changes in many countries recently. I recently made a video about Thailand. Today I want to talk about Romania because the government there has announced changes to the local tax that will come into force as early as 2024, and some of our customers have micro-businesses in Romania. This is important news also for those people who are thinking of starting micro-businesses. Of course, things can always change. For example, I recently made a video about Thailand where new laws have basically been decided, but interest groups can always protest and the laws can be withdrawn or changed again. So stay on top of events, even if this video remains online. What's planned in Romania now? Well, there were some rumors floating around that would have pretty much killed the micro-business entirely. On the one hand, there was the Romanian government's plan to introduce a profitability rate for micro-enterprises. In other words, if the profitability of a micro-enterprise is over 30%, i.e. the profit amounts to 30% of sales or more, then this regime could no longer be used at all. This applies to the majority of our customers. They simply have relatively high margins and would therefore no longer be able to use this micro-enterprise. Luckily, that didn't happen. This means that no matter what percentage of sales your profit is, even if it is 80 to 90%, which is the case with many digital entrepreneurs, you can continue to use this micro-enterprise regime. So to speak, the destructive aspect that was feared for a long time has not appeared in the current version of the law. What else will be changed? Firstly, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, you can only claim the 1% up to 60,000 euros. Yes, until now the 1% was actually usable up to 500,000 euros. Now it is reduced to 60,000. And 60,000 is also the limit for sales tax. Up to 60,000 euros you are a small business owner, including for VAT purposes. Now the 1% is also relevant for corporate tax on sales. But now the 3% will be uncapped in the future. Until now, you could no longer take advantage of the regime if you had a turnover of 500,000 euros. You had to pay 16% tax on profit. Now you have to pay, say, 3%, regardless of sales. This means that you no longer have to stack several companies. Yes. Once you reached 500,000, you could start a second company with 500,000, etc. Up to 3 companies were legally possible. Now you don't need that anymore. A Romanian company can make over 500,000 or over 1 million in sales and only pay 3% on sales. There is currently no cap on sales at all if this government decision passes through Parliament, which is likely. There is still the dividend tax of 8%, which is also a withholding tax. Whoever lives in Romania pays 8% on dividends. If you don't live there, you still pay 8% as withholding tax. This can be optimized through a holding company, for example within the EU, in Cyprus or Malta. Affiliated companies in the EU can use the so-called mother-daughter regulation. If they hold the shares for more than a year and hold more than 10% of the shares, the profit can go abroad without this 8%. Or we have to correct, the 8% is still withheld, but can be refunded abroad upon application for a tax certificate from the holding company. In other words, you can live tax-free in countries like Dubai or Panama or somewhere else by managing a holding company in the EU that gets dividends from Romania without withholding tax. You effectively pay 3% on sales, now without a cap, then you can send these dividends tax-free to Cyprus, for example, and because there is no withholding tax there and incoming dividends are not taxed, you can pay them out tax-free anywhere else in the world. This means that this change actually makes Romania more attractive per se. It is no longer 1% but 3%. But 3% on sales without a cap is still a relatively good option. The whole thing may become a little less attractive for entrepreneurs in Romania. They might pay 2% more taxes now. The 1% rate is also eliminated for certain sectors, for example IT, medical services, lawyers, etc. They always have to pay 3%. Of course, the whole micro-business structure is still entirely dependent on employee benefits. In other words, you need a permanent employee on site in order to be able to take advantage of this micro-company regime. You can be that yourself if you live in Romania. If you set up a Romanian company from abroad, you have to hire someone locally. There are also changes to the salary. Social security is no longer capped. So the turnover of the micro-enterprise is no longer capped, but the salary of people who pay themselves a salary is also no longer capped. This means that the Romanian social security, which is relatively high, is now added to the salary without a cap. In other words, you should set the salary as low as possible. Or possibly don't pay anything at all so you can avoid the whole thing. So in Romania itself the situation is not so great. Don't forget to make use of dividends. The best way abroad is through a holding company. There are numerous other changes to taxes in Romania, but they are particularly relevant for people in Romania. For example, there is now a wealth tax on properties over 500,000 euros. Even on cars over a certain value, 75,000 euros, there will be a wealth tax, expropriation as you could call it. A compulsory asset levy that is paid off over several years. In principle, the changes in Romania are to be welcomed. You may now pay 2% more taxes, but you have more time to take advantage of the regime and can significantly reduce your actual tax burden with the right holding solution. So if you do business in Romania, always do it with a holding company in the EU that is able to reclaim these 8% withholding taxes in Romania. Then you effectively pay 3% in an EU company, because you need an employee locally, but they are relatively inexpensive in Romania and often have good qualifications. In other words, Romania will continue to be a viable alternative for tax optimization in the European Union from 2024 onwards, which with the right setup can certainly keep up with jurisdictions like Malta and others. So much for that, and you'll see me in the next video about other current changes.